Chapter 14, The Three Plans. In the movies, people who go on a top secret mission always have lots of fun gadgets and maps and ropes, and sometimes even wear a cool hat. When you're 9 and over 3/4 though, and have to go to school every day, rescue missions are a lot harder, especially when you don't know where the people you want to rescue are, and you have to hide everything you're doing from the person you're going on the mission for. But even though we didn't have any gadgets or ropes or hats, we spent every break time and lunchtime and home time trying to think up new ideas that might help Ahmed find his family quickly. By Thursday morning, Tom and Josie and Michael had each come up with a plan, but I hadn't been able to think of anything. "Don't worry," said Josie. "You can help us if our ones will work." I tried to smile, but it didn't make me feel better. On the way to school, we went through all the plans. Tom went first. He said we should write to the Prime Minister to tell her to keep the gates open until Ahmed had found his family. He had even gotten the address of the Prime Minister's house from his dad and written out the letter. This is what it looked like. "Dear Prime Minister, we heard from some people on the bus that the government was going to lock the gates so that no more refugees could come in. But our friend Ahmed is a refugee boy. You might have heard about him because he's famous for beating up Brendan the bully, and he doesn't know where his mum and dad are and needs to find them. Please, Prime Minister, can you please keep the gates open so that he can find them and so that he can be happy again? Thank you." I thought it was a good idea, and so did Josie, but Michael said it wouldn't work because the Prime Minister was in charge of the government and had probably been the one who told the security guards to lock the gates and send them their special keys, so we couldn't ask her for any help at all. And then Josie talked about her plan, which was called the Special Appeal. She said we should ring a newspaper and tell them all about it because her mum and dad were always complaining about how many special appeals there were for charities in their newspapers. And once the appeal went out, Ahmed's mum and dad would see it and get in touch. Josie had written the special appeal out and made it as short as possible so that the newspapers could print it quickly. This is what it looked like. Special Appeal. Please everyone, a boy called Ahmed, who is in Nelson School, ran away from Syria because of bombs and lost his mum and dad too. If you see a man and a woman who looks like this is their son, or you're Ahmed's mum and dad, please ring Mrs. Khan on the telephone number at our school, which is below. We need to find Ahmed's family before the gates are locked, which is why this appeal is so special. We all liked the special appeal plan. But then Tom said that even if we did put the appeal in a newspaper, the newspaper would only be sold in England, and Ahmed's mum and dad, and anyone who might have seen them, would never see it. He knew, because when he lived in America, he only ever saw American newspapers, and that's what it must be like in all the countries of the world too. Then Michael told us about his plan. We should write to the High Court, to the judge sitting in the highest chair in the land, and ask them to order all the security guards to open the gates when they see Ahmed's mum and dad. He whispered. It's called an appeal too. I've heard my mum talking about them because her law firm are always doing them for people. I'd asked her to help Ahmed, but she's always complaining about how much work she has to do, and she charges hundreds of pounds an hour. "We can't afford that," cried out Tom. "I know," replied Michael, rolling his eyes, "which is why I'm saying we should do the appeal ourselves." "Is it an appeal like the newspaper one?" asked Josie. "Sort of, except it's for a judge. All we need to do is find out who the highest judge in the land is and write to them," replied Michael. "We could even send them your appeal," he said, giving Josie a nudge on the arm. "We'd only need to change it a little bit. Mum's always saying that judges have nothing better to do than read appeals all the time." We were all excited about the idea the most, and as no one could think of anything that might be wrong with it, we decided to go to the school library at home time to find out the name of the highest judge in the land. So when the last bell rang, we told Ahmed we had to go home quickly so he wouldn't follow us and headed straight there. Our school library isn't as big as the one Mum works in, but it has larger windows and lots more sunlight, which means you can see all the books better. Mrs. Finicky is our librarian. She always wears bright-coloured clothes and bright red lipstick, and you don't ever have to look for her because she's always standing behind the library counter. I like Mrs. Finicky because she always gets excited when you ask her anything. She tells people off for not looking after their books properly, just like Mum. She has a large sign on the counter that says, "Books are like people. Look past their covers and they'll take you on a great adventure." I like it because it's fun to imagine people as books and guess about what kind of adventure they might take you on. When we got to the library counter, we all looked up at Mrs. Finicky. She was wearing a sky blue top and a sky blue skirt. And Mrs. Finicky smiled and looked down at all of us and said, "Hello, and how can I help you today?" Tom and Josie and me all looked over at Michael and waited, so he asked, "Miss, do you know where we can find out who the highest judge in the land is? We need to find out for homework." "Really?" said Mrs. Finicky, frowning. We all nodded. Mrs. Finicky scratched her chin. "I think we'll have to look online for that," she said, and she started typing into her computer. We nodded and waited excitedly for an answer as Mrs. Finicky narrowed her eyes and looked at the screen. After a few seconds, she said, "Here we go. Right. Was it the name of the Lord Chief Justice you were after, or the High Court Judge for the Family Division?" We all looked at each other, and then Michael said, "Family Division, please." Mrs. Finicky wrote out the name on a piece of paper. When she gave it to Michael, we all looked over his shoulder and read, "H.C. Family Division, Dame Leslie Williamson." "Anything else?" asked Mrs. Finicky. Josie said, "Does it have her address there, miss?" Mrs. Finicky frowned again. "Her address?" she asked. "You have to send her a letter as part of your homework?" We all nodded. "So that it gets to her by tomorrow," I added. "It's the High Court of Justice you'll be needing to write to," said Mrs. Finicky, narrowing her eyes at the computer screen again as she copied it down. "But even if you post it today and it gets to her office tomorrow or on Saturday, remember that the courts are closed over the weekend, and it won't be the judge who gets your envelope. She'll have a secretary to open her mail for her." She handed the slip of paper with the address to Josie. "Anything else?" She looked at our downcast faces. "I'm sure she'll read your letter eventually," she added gently. "It might just take a while." We left and gathered in the hallway outside. "What are we going to do now?" asked Josie. Her face was all pink, which is what happens when she's really upset. "Even if we send the judge that appeal right away, the gates will be shut before she even gets it. It's already Thursday, and after this weekend is over, we'll only have 5 more days." We all looked at Michael, who shrugged and looked at the floor. "We've got to think of another idea," said Tom urgently. We all nodded, but I felt sick inside. I was scared that Ahmed's family wouldn't be found in time. We were all silent on the bus ride home that afternoon. Everyone was thinking hard, but I could tell from all our faces that none of us had come up with anything. I felt the worst, because at least everyone else had thought of something. I hadn't come up with a single plan. Now I know it was because my brain just wasn't ready to think of anything then. It wouldn't be ready until the weekend, but when it was, it came up with a plan so fantastic that nobody could say no to it. Not even a judge sitting in the highest chair in the land. Well, I wonder what kind of plan that might have been. What could you think of? Could you think of anything better than sending a letter to the judge, the highest judge in all the land? Have you got any other ideas? How could they get in touch with somebody that's so important that they need to make sure that these gates are not shut on the borders? What kind of plan would you come up with? Earlier in chapter 13, they were talking about people gazing, looking at people who are walking past or on the bus and deciding what they do, who they are, where they come from, what they like, what they don't like. If you're feeling a bit bored, why don't you look outside your window and just see who passes by and maybe make up a story for them. Where could they be from? What could they be doing? Are they on a mission? Try and be creative and have a little bit of fun. That's it for today. Come back tomorrow again for another 2 chapters. I hope you're having a lovely day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.